I'm very pleased, I would say privileged, to introduce Sophie von Stumm for this keynote. Sophie originally comes from Germany. She did her secondary school studies in Germany, then she did all of her studies in the UK. She studied at Royal Holloway, University of Edinburgh, Goldsmiths University in London, and she had an impressive career in different British universities. Her research focuses on different aspects of intelligence and relations between intelligence and the genome. And she has done impressive research in how polygenic scores can help understand intelligence. She established the Hungry Mind Lab for research on curiosity. She already has a lot of active students in research. And we all look forward to have her talk. So, Sophie?
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you for the invitation to keynote. I am painfully aware that I stand between you and your onwards travels after 3 full action-packed days. And I'm going to try and make this worth your time as best as I can. I'm also aware that as the closing keynote speaker, it is somewhat my responsibility to let you leave here with a warm and fuzzy feeling inside. So that you go back home and you have fond memories of this wonderful meeting in Zurich, and that you have beautiful thoughts about intelligence research and what to do next in this field. And whilst I have all intentions to deliver on the warmness and fuzziness, I do think such thoughts follow best from slight levels of discomfort. And so I very much hope that I won't unsettle you too much, but I will just be mildly disturbing enough to have you reflect on what we have thought about for the past 3 days and how we can take this forward in order to have our field and discipline blossom. Now, I want to start off with a bang. We have reason to celebrate. It is the 30-year anniversary of the editorial on mainstream science and intelligence. It was led by Linda Gottfriedson, signed by 52 intelligence researchers. 2 of them are in the room today. Rich Heyer is one of them, and David Lubinsky is another. And this editorial gave us 25 statements that reflected the consensus at the time about intelligence research. Now, most of these statements would not need much revision today to still count as the consensus on intelligence research. That does not mean that nothing has happened. Indeed, we've had very rich 30 years in intelligence research. So if we look at Intelligence, the journal, we see here the number of publications that we've had over the past 30 years, so from 1994 through to 2024, and the line plotted across them marks the citations. So you can see that there is a substantial body of science that has been produced in this journal, and a substantial number of people or writings that refer to it and that cite this work. So I thought we'd take a closer look at what are the main contributions that have been published in intelligence over the past 30 years. So these are the top 5 cited papers corrected by year of publication, so how long they have been published for. So the first one is Ian Deary's seminal paper on the association between educational achievement and intelligence. The second one is the idea of emotional intelligence and that it does meet the standards to be considered intelligence. The third one is the famous summary or review paper on CHC theory, That's Cattell, Horn, Carroll. Number 4 is Benedek and colleagues on intelligence, creativity, and cognitive control. And then finally, Strenz's seminal meta-analysis on the association between socioeconomic status and intelligence. Now, I had a quick look at the top 50 cited papers, and I roughly coded them. There was no inter-rater reliability. Nobody checked that my coding was correct. So you have to trust me here that I got the topics right. But I thought we'd take a quick look at the themes that we tend to address in articles that are published in intelligence. We're very interested in the structure of intelligence. A lot of the most cited papers address the relationship between intelligence and other cognitive abilities like working memory or executive function or creativity or spatial ability. We also do a lot of work in the area of prediction, in particular when we're looking at life outcomes or educational attainment. We have a thing for measurement. And then we are interested in theory development and the overlap with other trade domains. Now, if we take a broader look outside of our own journal, if you will, and I should say here for full disclosure, I am associate editor of Intelligence, we might want to think about what are the big findings. What are the big findings of the last 30 years that we should be thinking and talking about? And I very much welcome any suggestions that you might have. Please email me if you disagree with the list or ask me later about it. But these are the 5 that I thought are the standout findings that I would quote if somebody asked me what was the last 30 years, not the origins, what was the last 30 years of intelligence research. So it's G. That is the first one. It's confirmed many times, but the seminal papers on general intelligence and its replicability across data sets have actually only been published in the past 30 years. The second point, brain training doesn't work. I will caveat this. Education does, a point that I will come back to. But we had a long wave and enthusiasm for an investment in so-called brain trainings, in particular those that were computer-assisted, with the idea that we could enhance people's working memory, executive function, and other specific abilities. And we usually found that these effects faded out and they didn't transfer to other ability domains. And there was no brain training program that was advertised as such and had any positive effects on intelligence or on stopping cognitive aging. The third one is a finding from behavioral genetics, and it's the advent of polygenic scores. The fact that we can now use person-specific estimates of genetic propensity to predict individual differences in intelligence. We have known that intelligence is heritable for a long time, but polygenic scores are new. They open up new opportunities for doing research, but also possibly new opportunities in applied settings. The fourth finding is the Flynn effect. As Jakob said, it may just be measurement error. So I'm not sure what the future holds for the Flynn effect, but it is definitely one of the outstanding findings and interesting observations, one that intrigues a lot of interest from researchers and the public alike. And finally, of course, we have the PFIT theory, which Ian Deary called the best available answer to the question of where in the brain intelligence resides. And that was proposed by Rich Heyer and Rex Young and has been confirmed and replicated ever since. So we know where intelligence is, we know something about its structure, we know something about how we can manipulate or not manipulate it, and what its causes are. And yet, somehow, over the past 3 days, and in preparing for this talk, I felt reminded of the wonderful fairy tale of the ugly duckling by Hans Christian Andersen. And I had the opportunity to reread it. And the ugly duckling really doesn't fare well. It's quite horrible what happens to the poor ugly duckling. It's bitten by other ducks and animals. It's discredited. And it receives a lot of hostility. It's even shot at occasion. It's misunderstood and belittled as useless, as dangerous, as something that takes up space that it doesn't really deserve. And ultimately, it's left to die or disappear and discarded into the cold winter. And it's only a sort of miracle that it survives and eventually finds its way again. And we've talked a fair bit about how others, external to the field of intelligence, may make intelligence researchers feel like they are the ugly duckling or representatives of a discipline that will count as the ugly duckling. But what I want to do now is to take a look at ourselves from the inside and ask what we can do to overcome our ugly duckling feelings. Because what the others think about what we do and how we respond to things is one side, but what is it that we reflect to the outer world? The conclusion of the ugly duckling is, and I will read that out in German because it is phrased, I think, closer to the Danish original than the English translation allows. Es schadet nichts, in einem Entenhofe geboren zu sein, wenn man nur in einem Schwanenei gelegen hat. And that means to be born on a duck farm is of no consequence of those hatched from a swan's egg. So if we want to be hatched from a swan's egg as a discipline of intelligence research, we have to do some stuff ourselves. And I want to spend the time today talking about what I think the things are that we should prioritize in order to realize our swan status amongst the other disciplines in psychological science. And I've come up with the concept that I call the 3 M's. I think the improvement of intelligence research and its reputation lies in methods, in mentoring, and in the message that we send. And I will start with the methods, because methods are the foundations of any empirical science. Now, outside of intelligence, the discussion around open science principles has been extensive, vast, and very popular. And yet, at this meeting, we didn't hear that much about it. To my surprise, there weren't that many pre-registered studies. There wasn't that much talk of open data sharing, of sharing materials. What you see here is what we call the open science badges. These are the 3 most typically cited principles of open science. It means that you pre-register your analysis. That is, you say what you plan to do in your statistics before you start looking at any data. You share your data openly so people can use it and can replicate your findings, and you share your materials. And these badges are given out by some journals. In particular, since 2018, the ideas are a little bit older, and it would be a good idea for us to adopt these principles, not only for the journals that are associated with our field, but also for the conferences that we have and the submissions that we accept and that we invite for presentation. Now, do these open science principles do anything good? I mean, sounds pretty, but is it effective? Now, studies have shown that if you practice open science and you have these badges, the trust in the science that you publish by scientists and students increases. That's good news because we want to be trusted by the others, right? We want to have findings that other people in psychology and in the wider field of research and the public believe. The second point is about pre-registration. I think pre-registration is the most important of the open science principles that we are dealing with here, especially in our field where we rely a lot on secondary data analysis. And so it's important to formulate precise hypotheses in advance and to make sure that we test for those in the ways that are most appropriate. And there has been a lot of work done on the effectiveness of pre-registration for improving science. So indeed, in a comparison of 193 studies that had been pre-registered versus 193 studies that had not been pre-registered but were on a similar topic, the ones that had been pre-registered had larger samples and achieved greater statistical power, suggesting that they are likely to produce more robust findings that will be replicable in the future and ultimately create better science. The second finding is about us and our perspective, scientists' perspective on pre-registration. It does take more time. You have to write a pre-registration. You have to think about it. You save a little bit of time afterwards when you're actually doing the analysis because you've planned everything already. But there's no lying about that doing a pre-registration is more time-consuming than just going wildly into your data. but it does make the science better. And a large-scale survey of scientists does confirm that. So everyone who engages in that process feels that it is beneficial to their own work and judges other people's works according to these principles. My second suggestion for improving our methods is to update the information that is publicly available about this society, for example, and about intelligence research in general. This is the current Wikipedia entry for ISIR. I screenshotted this morning. I did not come up with this idea myself, but an early career researcher pointed out to me that this is what is currently on the internet about this society. The article itself is flagged for inadequate referencing and it's threatened about to be pulled altogether. It is very outdated information. It is not exactly flattering either, if I'm briefly summarizing here. It lists at the bottom of this a number of presidents of ISIR until 2019. After that, the presidents seem to have ceased. I'm pretty certain that's not true, but there you go. It actually states false information, i.e. that the Journal of Intelligence is associated with the society. This is not the case, at least not according to the society's own website. Indeed, the society recommends 2 journals in case you're interested in reading about intelligence or interested in publishing in the area of intelligence. And those 2 are up here. So that might be a little bit difficult if we're thinking about attracting people to our field or having good credentials for doing science, research, and publishing. So maybe someone should revisit that Wikipedia entry, update it, and give some better resources so we can be represented in something that is genuinely considered a very wide resource of information for people, including scientists and public alike. My third suggestion is about causal study designs. I echo Rich's keynote here, and I hope he doesn't mind me copying from him in that. Causality is what we are trying to do as psychological scientists. The observation of associations is interesting, it's a good starting point, but ultimately what we want to try and find out is how effects occur and what causes what. Now, at this meeting, I noticed a certain ease in the use of causal language without using methods that allow inferring causality. We've heard about impact, we've heard about effects, we've heard very clear statements about findings with very little sugarcoating or caveats about methodological limitations. And we have methods, even in intelligence, where we say we cannot manipulate intelligence per se, perhaps, and randomly allocate people to conditions based on their IQ. But we have methods that allow us to do causal inferences. We have true experimental designs, randomized controlled trials, for example, and we have genetically sensitive study designs that are undergoing an evolution right now with a whole new package and suite of methods and analytical methods that have become available to reliably and robustly derive causal inferences. And we can use those, and I think we definitely should use those. And I want to make very clear that I don't think that this is a consequence of or responsibility of students or early career researchers not using the right language. It is the responsibility of people like me who are standing here who have not taught the students appropriately about the use of causal language. If that happens at a conference like this, it's because I didn't do my job very well. And it's likely that some others here have the same problem. It's something that I think we should reflect on as a group of researchers interested in intelligence. That brings me to students and the mentoring that we do. I think this meeting is really remarkable in its support for early career researchers and students. It's the most funded meeting in that regard that I have ever been to. The financial support for coming here was absolutely exceptional. It's unique that you have so much help for early career researchers to travel internationally to show their work in a fantastic city like this. We had a beautiful dinner, we had fantastic setting, really nice coffee breaks, everything is beautifully organized. That's really brilliant. to encourage people come to these meetings and to make it possible to share their findings. We also have student awards, multiple ones, which are very important for early career researchers to show that they are distinguished in their field and they're making valuable contributions. And we had an enormous representation of students in our talks. So we had over a third of the Research Enlightening talks at this meeting were given by students who were eligible for awards. So that is truly, truly remarkable. But we can always do more to support students. And perhaps we can also do more at times to recognize that supporting students will lead to changes and shifts in perspective. Students are not lost causes, and we should make the effort to teach them, especially if we think that they're having misconceptions or misunderstandings of what's going on. And so here are my suggestions of what we could do to expand our mentoring. The first is that we could start having more advanced training opportunities. Advanced training opportunities are for people during their PhD years or post-PhD. Those tend to be very rare. The United States system is a little bit different in the way that the US PhD students tend to have classes as they're going through their PhD, but in Europe we don't do that much. So there's a very basic statistics course usually that you complete in a very basic research methods course, and after that you're left to your own devices and your PhD supervisor. But the stuff that we're doing is complicated. We are no longer just running some correlations, but we are imputing missing data. We are using full information maximum likelihood. We are using causal modeling. We are collecting data online. It's not that you just flog some questionnaire online, but you have to be very careful about designing those in order to collect good quality data. We are living in an increasingly complex world in that. And so one way of supporting early careers in our field would be to respond to the need of having more training. And if you say that costs money and we don't have money, I agree with the first point, it costs money, but we do have money. And I hope Rich doesn't mind again that I call him out on this, but I know that he may not have the money right now, but he knows where to find it. So if you have an idea for a pre-conference training workshop or another way of providing advanced training, Rich is the man you should drop an email to and discuss your idea with him. If you'd rather have an alternative, here is a call from APS that came out last week. It's called the Estes Fund request, the Estes Fund, and they are asking for summer school and workshop proposals that focus on mathematical and computational modeling and psychology. And if you think that's not exactly what we are doing here, one of their core emphasis is cognitive architecture and cognitive structure for their call. That's a theme they're interested in. And mathematical and computational modeling is very much aligned with the kind of statistics that we're doing in the society. So that would be another opportunity to secure funding in order to have advanced training opportunities. My second recommendation would be to enrich the learning resources that we already offer. So on the ISIR website, we have this wonderful page with learning resources. We have recommendations about books on intelligence, we have videos and interviews about intelligence, and we have a list of data sets that might be useful in case you want to study intelligence and that are relatively easy to access for researchers who don't necessarily have funding. But we could build on that. So one thing that we could list is where you can actually learn about intelligence, the courses that are available and that we teach. And some of us do teach intelligence, although the rumor persists that not enough of us are doing it. But the ones who are offering courses, it would be a good idea to link those here. The other thing is, because everything in life costs money, right? To have a list of funders or funding opportunities that are specifically relevant for people pursuing research in the area of intelligence. My third suggestion is that we extend the mentoring opportunities at the meetings that we have. And I'm copying here from other conferences that I've been to. For example, one recently where they have so-called mentoring lunches. So people who have spent more time in the academic field or discipline, offer to have lunch with early career researchers to advise them on career progression, funding applications, fellowship applications, but also on subject matter topics. And those lunches tend to be very popular and successful, and it's just another slightly informal opportunity to meet and build a network for the early careers and to get to know the more senior people in the field. Similarly, there are receptions for first-time conference attendees. These are not held separately, usually from the actual reception, but they're a little bit before, like the first half an hour for people who come for the first time, so they meet each other and start building connections and a network. It's not a huge change to anything that we're doing. It would just be another small addition to the support that we already have in place for early careers. Now, that brings me to the crunch point of message. We don't sell ourselves very well when we send messages about intelligence into the world. And then we sometimes have the false impression that nobody is listening to us. This is the cover of The Economist from the 13th of July. How to raise the world's IQ was the leading theme. There were about 5 articles associated with that. And the main argument was that raising the world's IQ was the single most thing that would have the most benefit for the population and the planet. That would give us the greatest returns, and that as a world population, it is our responsibility to do that, and it is a terrible moral, political, and cultural failing if we don't. And The Economist focused in particular on the idea of nutrition or malnutrition and how malnutrition impairs children's cognitive development and their intelligence. And so a lot of these articles focused on how we can ensure the redistribution of food, and in particular nutritious food, so we ensure that everybody gets what they need in terms of nutrition. And the interesting point about that is that although this is an excellent point and nobody would argue with it, it falls into the category of diagnostic or outcome. So there was no idea in The Economist that intelligence could be changed going forward or over longer periods of time. It was just, if we feed children well early in life, they will be intelligent, and then the world will be a better place. And that is a sort of one-step program. There's no idea of growth. And Frances made this point excellently in her talk about how much we know about development and how much growth there is in intelligence. And the problem of messaging that intelligence research is about change is in part exaggerated by the G problem. G is the correct answer to the question, how is intelligence structured? There's nothing wrong with that. But it's generalist and it's latent. How are you going to change that? How is an applied field that is trying to help one specific child with a specific cognitive impairment or profile, they want to help that or target that, how are they going to deal with G? It's not going to be particularly helpful. And that is part of why, for example, a lot of researchers in the field of cognitive aging are not fond of G. A lot of education psychologists are not fond of G because they want to target specific learning difficulties. They want to target dyspraxia, dyslexia, and to say this is all general and driven by the same underlying domain that we can't directly observe doesn't strike them as particularly helpful. I want to draw a parallel here with a different society that has taken a slightly different approach to a similar problem, in my opinion, the Behavioral Genetics Association. They meet every year, like us. Next time is in Georgia in June. Their conferences are well attended, and they have less public criticism, let's put it that way. They attract less negative press and news coverage than intelligence does. And yet they are geneticists. And genetics should have a really bad reputation if we're going by reputation issues. But genetics has recognized one thing, that its field of study is about change. So the focus of the Behavioral Genetics Conference that I just went to this year was the gene-environment interplay. and the question of when genetics matter under which environmental conditions. And with that, the idea that if we manipulate the environmental conditions, we can also influence the genetic effects that may or may not be there. And on top of that, the geneticists have epigenetics, the idea that our gene expression varies according to the environmental conditions that we are in. Both of these themes signal change and growth and the potential for learning information that will then help us to make something different. I'm not saying that we can't do that. In fact, I think at this conference, we've already seen amazing work that reflects that. And I'm a bit sorry that I didn't swap slides with Francis before this talk, because I would have shamelessly put some of your stuff in there too. But we had a fantastic talk from Till about the effects of secondary schooling on IQ in a quasi-experimental design. And that replicates a large body of other work that shows that education is likely to improve intelligence. So we have John Protzko has been very prolific in this field, conducting meta-analysis. He's also established a database of studies that shows different ways in which intelligence may be increased. Stuart Ritchie and Elliot Tucker-Drop did a much cited meta-analysis on this very topic. So it's not as if there wasn't change in intelligence, or that you couldn't observe it, or that we didn't know where it stemmed from. We have a very concrete idea where it comes from. Also, we can think about change in other ways. The winner of the Student Award talked about the Flynn effect. The Flynn effect is the observation of change patterns in intelligence. And again, this makes it very clear that intelligence is not a rubber stamp that says you're one thing or the other for now and forever, but it's something that we study, that's a phenomenon that undergoes change over time. So, these are the 3 points that I think we need to tackle so we don't feel that we are chased off from the duck farm, but so that we can realize the potential as swan that we potentially have as a research discipline. This talk has gone through several iterations, and so I'm enormously grateful to my lab, who had the patience to listen to this in various idea stages and give me constructive feedback. All errors and outrageous claims are mine, of course. I want to thank the organizers again for hosting this wonderful meeting, the Institute of Advanced Studies in Paris, who gave me the time to think about this stuff, and the University of York for supporting in general the kind of things that I do. And I thank you very much for your attention. I kept it short and sweet, so we can have a lot of questions and then go off into the sunshine of Zurich. Thank you.
I want to address the point you made about Wikipedia.
Please take the microphone, because then we can, yeah.
Yes, I'd like to address the point you made about Wikipedia. Now, I personally have spent a tremendous amount of my time during grad school and before editing Wikipedia articles related to intelligence. And the net result is that I was topic banned from these articles for about 8 years. The unfortunate reality is that these articles have been infiltrated by people who have way too much time and are tendentious, very aggressive, blank slatists, basically. And they make it impossible to get anything done, especially if you have other things to do with your life, which most of these people who are responsible for the state of these articles do not, apparently. So the only way that I think we can fix this, one person is not enough, clearly. If every single person in this room registers a Wikipedia account, some of whom should be under their real name, where it says, I am an expert in this field, I have a PhD in psychology or whatever, in their bio, then we start editing these articles and improving them, we might have a chance. But the way the state of things now is, it's an impossible environment. I've tried, some other people in this room I know have also tried to improve these articles. It is an uphill battle, and we need a lot more support in that end. So, sorry, that was a comment and not a question, but.
We'll take it as a comment and ask everybody to register a Wikipedia account under their real name with their academic credentials in the bio line.
Thank you for a very interesting talk, and I'm glad for the time you put into it. I mendaciously said I had pre-registered this question just to get into your good books, so you can already discount me as an individual. The thing which I am struggling with is there are some aspects of what we find in intelligence research which are optimism limiting. All right? So my question to Rich was, what if we couldn't boost intelligence? And Rich's answer is, we're going to do it. I would take a different view, which is, accept that there are some natural limitations, but wow, there's things you can do with your intelligence if you follow some training and concentrate on the things you can do, and also don't attempt things you can't do. So what I'm putting forward to you, and I've taken notes and I think you're very right, on some things we've just been defensive and wrong, but to put it in the form that my daughter did, she said, well, the problem with your stuff is it comes up with a number, and it's probably a number people don't like. How do we get around that? I know you've given us lots of pointers as to how to do things better, but essentially we're going to say, no, you're probably a duck, no swan.
Well, I think that brings me back to the 3 points that I tried to make. Ducks can become swans. We saw that in the fairy tale. We see that in our field. Intelligence can be changed. We've heard lots of talks about this. The number thing, there are lots of other fields in psychology that place numbers on things, and yet they're not unpopular. Myers-Briggs, I'm not going to comment much on the validity on that, but it's hugely popular. Nobody cries a tear when they get their feedback or score on that. They find it intriguing and engaging and start exploring who they are.
That's different. I mean, that's a classification. This is my style. You know, I'm a mod or a rocker. It's not a limiting number. That's, I think, the problem.
But this is the interpretation. Why is your IQ number limiting? It is because we tell people that is your limit. There's no necessary truth to that. If I can change my IQ with a year of schooling by 5 points, as we've seen repeatedly at this meeting, telling me my point now and me being unhappy about it should just make me enroll for the next school.
Other question?
Sophie, I love the talk, but I do wonder, how do we know we are swans? Maybe we are, in fact, ugly, incompetent ducklings who are not going to grow up to be swans, but in fact, be rejected by our fellow ducks. I mean, I like to think that we're really swans under the hood, but isn't that sort of an optimistic belief?
Well, optimism is always a good thing.
I know, and I'm an optimist,
field,
and I think you're right, but...
That's why I started with the 30-year anniversary. As a field, we are recognized, we publish, we are cited. We have existed for more than 100 years as a discipline. We have made substantial findings and contribution that are widely recognized as such. So why would we think of ourselves as useless ducklings rather than something that can improve and earn better recognition going forward?
I just want us to think about, because schizophrenics also think they're Napoleon. That doesn't make them ugly Napoleon. That doesn't make them ugly humans. They're not Napoleon. I don't think we're schizophrenic, by the way. I think we are, in fact, misunderstood. But I just want us to consider the alternatives. Are we being pretentious?
Well, I mean, that is a judgment call that everyone who works in an academic field needs to make themselves. And ultimately, we have the tools, I believe most of us, to evaluate the body of empirical evidence that we've produced. We are all fans in some way or another of the scientific method. We all believe that empirical science does tell us information that is valid going forward. And so I would say that we have a body of empirical science that we can rely on that evidences that we are making a meaningful contribution, and we're not just guided by the fantasy of being Napoleon.
Yeah, I don't think that we are the ugly ducklings. ISIR is. By the way, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a researcher, but
You want to opt out already?
No. No. What I want to say is using Bill's reference to under the hood. I see ISIR as an engine of a larger vehicle, and that. If you look at worldviews, the general worldview right now is to reject the notion that G has a larger impact than it does, and probably much larger than the environment. People don't accept that. And it is important to be able to change what you can change and find out what you can change, but it's not being very realistic if you don't accept what cannot be changed. So I think the big question is, and I can't answer it, and really nobody has answered it, not just here, but in the world in general, how do we overcome that mindset, that worldview that rejects the objectivity, the truth that comes out of ISIR. And frankly, that's why I don't think ISIR is an ugly duckling, because it's much closer to the truth than the APA or a lot of other organizations.
Well, so there's one thing I have to respond to, the idea of pitching G against the environment. G is not environment. People differ in intelligence. Differences in intelligence are a result of the interplay between genetics and environment. G is a phenotypic measure, something that we derive from directly observed test scores. It's not something that stands against the environment. We are again coming to the argument about change, and that we need to recognize what we can and can't change. Reminds me very much of the mantra of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, it's a good line. But we can change IQ. We can change intelligence. And I know this is unpopular in this room, which is why I'm bringing it up, because I don't think we do ourselves any favors with this. A, it leads to bad reputation, and B, it is not in line with our science. I'll refer back to Francis' keynote, which gave you a beautiful overview on change. I'll quote that economics article again. The Economist is not a scientific outlet, I'm fully aware of that. But the point of malnutrition and the association with IQ, and the very strong likelihood that this is a causal association, holds. So to say that we cannot change intelligence, we cannot change it through gimmick methods, no doubt. Like I can let you play a computer game and expect that the IQ score goes up, and it won't. But that doesn't mean that there is no change whatsoever in it. And we see that in developmental studies all over the place. People decline in IQ just as much as they gain over the lifespan. I didn't put them up because I like the idea of 5 big findings, and the 6th one kind of ruined the symmetry. But Phil Ackerman's theory about process, personality, and intelligence is a different way of looking at it that makes it very clear that we change in intelligence as we grow older. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, but I wasn't saying that one is, you can't have, but they both work together, obviously. I was just saying weighing the two and their influence on a particular situation. And that in general, the world, it downplays the importance of genetics in determining intelligence and other abilities. It downplays it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't change what you can change. And if you can change G, go for it.
I just want to say quickly that it's been my experience over the last decade of doing a lot of social media that there is less antipathy out there than we imagine, that the public at large is hungry for the kind of information that we have, including everything you just said about change. They don't know about genetics. They don't know that genetics is probabilistic and not deterministic. There's a lot of ignorance and a lot of hunger for good information. And we have a very good story to tell. And when we tell it, we do very well. And we can't be distracted by dishonest critics who know better, but still find us an easy target to advance themselves. And people in behavioral genetics have targeted us to take some heat off themselves, in my opinion. But we do have a good story to tell. We shouldn't hesitate to tell it. I've got 10,000 followers on Twitter. All I do on Twitter is repost good scientific articles, typically without comment from me. I had podcasts, Jordan Peterson, 500,000, Lex Friedman, 1.8 million, tens of thousands of comments online, some ridiculously stupid, others very intelligent and constructive. So my bottom line is we need to tell our story. We shouldn't be secretive about what goes on at these meetings. We just have to frame it in a positive way, as you suggest.
Positive and transparent, yes. I will pick on a behavior geneticist point because as they are not here in representation, it seems like I should defend that corner briefly. It is not generally the case that behavior geneticists shame intelligence research.
I only have two in mind, two specific people.
I thank you for quantifying the issue. That is all right.
Well, I see. Well, I see it very much like Robert, because I think it's an exceptionally good story to tell. You can be what you want to be is not true and makes us exceptionally unhappy. And I think it's a beautiful thing that intelligence research says, you know, it's not about becoming smarter, it's about a hierarchy and you have to accept it. And it's a good thing. And I think it's you know, it's also up and coming. I think people accept more and more that there is a genetic component, and it's not that we can choose whatever we want to be, male, female, or whatsoever. And it's a good story. I believe it's a good story. Of course, you can improve on an individual level, but altogether there is just a genetic component which gives us a sort of hierarchy. And I believe that on long term this will serve us well, because it's a true story that kind of brings us back to control is not the ultimate thing. Control makes us unhappy. I think accepting who we are is a good part and is a good exercise.
Yeah, I will reiterate here that genetics are not deterministic. What we are talking about is propensities and probabilities. So I'm not so sure about the term of hierarchy in this context. It's more about individual differences and trying to identify causes of those, and with that trying to identify the extent to which we may be able to manipulate or modify these causes in order to achieve better outcomes. And I think that is another issue that I'm sure Rich has encountered in his public engagement work a lot, the misinterpretation of what it means to find genetic influences. It doesn't mean that things are innate, it doesn't mean that things are immutable, and it doesn't mean that we should necessarily do one or the other policy. It is an empirical observation that some people are genetically more inclined to certain things under certain environmental conditions than other people. That's all that genetics can tell us in its decontextualized form.
And the last one.
As I said, I very often have to sell intelligence research to teachers. And my simple message is intelligence is the starting capital. People differ in the starting capital, but teachers are responsible for investing it into knowledge. And depending on how good you invest it, even students with lower intelligence can excel in
Sorry,
in
we're
very
restructuring.
many fields. So did you get it? So yeah,
So the teachers
Yeah, they-
maximize the investment.
they really have to guide the investment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that is a very nice image to use when we talk about intelligence in educational contexts and try to communicate our findings to educators. Yes.
Is that it? Okay. Any concluding remarks?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask a question. Sorry.
No,
No
no,
concluding remarks for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful job. I was taking copious notes, Sophie. A wonderful agenda for the board to address. So we'll be meeting next Friday. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending the conference. On behalf of ISIR, I thoroughly enjoyed your presence, your attendance, and the stimulating conversations and talks. Everybody have safe travels back to wherever you're going, and I hope to see you next year in the Windy City, Chicago. I'll brief you and update you as needed between now and then. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it.